Good evening. I'm Jill Dempsey. Welcome to Toronto Votes 2022 on CBC Radio 1 and CBC Listen. The polls have now closed in the municipal elections across the province, and voters like you have made their choice. Throughout the municipal election, you told us what issues you're taking to the ballot box.
I know I have to exercise my vote if I want things to change.
It's time for a change, I think, Well,
I'm interested mostly in what their plans are and how they're going to bring the plans to actions.
Honestly, just make places cheaper so that families aren't living paycheck by paycheck.
There is a lack of affordable housing, a huge lack of affordable housing.
I'd like to see them get going on the transit.
Commuting downtown from the Malvern community, I'm taking a bus to get to the RT, then the subway line, and then getting on a streetcar to get to where I have to work.
The government, them not paying no attention over to Jane and Fit. They pay attention to other places.
I need to put on new shocks on the car because there's lots of potholes.
I was at Nathan Phillips Square the other day and the rats were feasting on litter behind me. We can do so much better.
It's like the old New York. In New York City years ago, and it was disgusting. Now we're looking the same way.
The level of engagement that I've seen surrounding this election is just rock bottom and totally out of whack with what people's needs are.
We're going to get tense. We're going to go back outside. So what are you going to do? You're going to put us in jail and tell people that you can't afford to house us? Does that make sense?
The only shelter that's available to us is a dormitory style, which is loud and violent.
I don't know who to vote for. Yeah.
City Council candidates, Ward 15.
Even though if you're young and listening to this, if you're old and listening to this, every vote counts.
I think that Toronto's mayor and the city itself has not lacked powers. It has lacked vision and action.
I'm not pointing to any great monument that's going to exist in the sky or on the ground. And I just think if people look back at the pandemic and see when the city faced its worst crisis ever, what did experienced leadership produce for us?
Here in Toronto, all eyes are on John Tory and his bid for his third term as the city's mayor, and on the wards in the cities without incumbents. We'll be tracking the winners tonight all over the GTA. Sean Jeffords is CBC Toronto's municipal reporter. He is here to put all those numbers into context. Great to have you with us, Sean.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
So what will you be looking for as the night progresses?
I think I'm really going to focus on those open ward races that we're seeing out there. There are 7 of them. We've got some really interesting races going on. One in Spadina, Fort York, where you've got 12 people vying to replace Councillor Joe Cressy. For the first time in over 20 years, we don't have a Ford on the ballot in Etobicoke North. So you have 16 people there trying to win that council seat. You've also got a really interesting race in University of Rosedale, where the former environmental commissioner, Diane Sachs, is facing Norm DiPasquale, the school board trustee, and Robin Buxton Potts, the former interim councillor.
We need to talk about Cynthia Lai and the difficult news that all of us received late Friday afternoon, that the incumbent for Scarborough Southwest has died. Well known in the community, deeply entrenched. How does that vote proceed tonight?
The city acted pretty quickly and laid out the rules. Essentially, under the Municipal Elections Act, what will occur is that any votes counted for Lai will be set aside. They won't count at all. It's as if she hasn't been nominated. So the people who are on the ballot will remain. The person who has the most votes at the end of the night will win that seat.
I know that there were some who were part of her campaign were suggesting that perhaps there should be a by-election as the result of Cynthia Lai's death.
And, I wouldn't be surprised if that discussion kind of continues. The Municipal Elections Act does lay out pretty clearly what the rules are in the event of this type of circumstance, as tragic as it is. They are there. They are following those rules. Perhaps there's a court challenge down the road. I guess we'll see.
I'm going to bring Hayden Waters into this conversation because I know you've been in Lai's ward today. What have you been hearing from people going to the polls?
Yeah, I was at a community center in Scarborough North and talking to people who had just actually voted. And most of the folks I talked to were aware that Cynthia Lai had died. There were notices all over the place at the community center in many different languages. And a staff member actually came out to tell us that they were explaining that any votes cast for Lai, as we said there, can't be counted in these results. So keeping all that in mind, several I spoke to actually said they went in and voted for her anyway. They had done it before in the past and said, one actually told me it was just instinct to put the check there. They did it actually as a moment for the candidate to kind of pay tribute. And lie signs were actually still up, I noticed, right across from the polling place where I had gone to as well. So one person did tell me they didn't know until they went in, but they didn't intend to vote for that candidate anyways. But people still kind of casting those votes there, as you say, right? So.
All right. Well, Hayden Waters will be roving tonight, and we will be hearing from him again throughout the broadcast. The other big part of the story tonight, of course, is John Tory and his efforts to secure a third term as Toronto mayor. A fairly low-key campaign, relying on his experience. Will that bring in the votes tonight?
I think that's a great question, and I think it's pretty fair to say that he's run a classic front runners campaign. He's emphasized his experience. He said, transit, if you want transit built, if you want the budget gap filled, I'm your guy. And I think he's led in most of the polls that we've seen. We'll see if that translates into a victory tonight.
Well, the stories will develop after we learn the numbers, and we won't learn the numbers until we hear from our Linda Ward, who's going to be here with us all night with the results. Linda, what are some of the key races that you want to pay attention to?
Well, of course, Jill, we're going to be watching the mayoral races from across the GTA, and we're going to be watching each and every one of those wards. It's going to be ward on the wards tonight. So, of what the new city council will look like here in the city. Now, unlike the 2018 election, we're sort of pitted incumbent versus incumbent in a much smaller council. This year, we have those 7 wards without an incumbent. We're going to be watching those. And many of those veteran councillors who stepped down were really on the progressive side of Toronto City Council. So the winners in those 7 parts of the city will be very important to the mayor's agenda. We're also, as I said, we're going to be following the races outside of Toronto, especially in Brampton. After a year of infighting on council there, Patrick Brown's departure to run for the federal Conservative leadership and his return after being disqualified, there's a lot of interest in how that is going to be playing out. Patrick Brown's also not the only party leader looking for a mayor's chair on a city council. Former provincial leader Stephen Del Duca is campaigning for mayor in Vaughan. And his NDP counterpart, Andrea Horwath, is running for mayor of Hamilton in a really close fight there. And that may be one of the most interesting races of the night.
We do have our political analyst with us this evening as well. I'd like to introduce you to Victoria Kukets, who is host of the Democracy Dialogue at the Democratic Engagement Exchange, a research fellow in democracy at the Public Policy Forum, as well as a 2022 Civic Action Diverse City Fellow, and Angela Drennan is a Vice President and Group Lead in Municipal Affairs at Sussex Strategy. She has 10 years experience working at Toronto City Hall for a number of councillors. Great to have you both with us this evening. I'm going to start with you, Victoria. When you look back on this election, what do you think were the issues that resonated for voters?
Thanks so much, Jill. And it's such a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you. You know, I've been hosting community conversations for the past few weeks and actually over much of my career. And the issues that are really coming up are what make for a decent, accessible, and sustainable life in our city. And, you know, what's coming to the top of the pile is not surprising. It's affordable housing. It's the environment and sustainability. It's transportation. It's the vital services that people really need to work well, to be of a high quality, and so that they can equitably participate in our city. But I'll tell you what's most on my mind. It's low democratic engagement. It's low turnout in the elections. I've been working in nonpartisan democratic engagement for over a decade now. So I'm worried about the fact that many choose not to participate or use their power of collective decision making. In the last election, we saw 38% of people actually came out to the polls, and they're making decisions for 100% of us. And this seems to be the status quo. If we look at, advanced polling, those numbers are lower than the last time and the last time before that. So I want everyone to feel like they're part of this and that they have a vested interest in processes and outcomes around municipal elections.
Angela, how would you assess the level of engagement in terms of this campaign?
Well, it's great to be back, Jill. Thank you for having me. Actually, what I'm thinking about during this campaign is the power of incumbency and how that impacts voter turnout as well. it's interesting because, as you said, it was a quieter mayoral campaign, and that actually can trickle down to the local level as well, where it doesn't really drive as much participation. But what I do think is kind of missing here is, that power of incumbency allows the mayor and councils to be bold. So I'm looking to see, as we head into a very tight budget system this time, like, are the capital projects how are they going to fund capital projects? Are they going to do a pay-as-you-go system like they do in Windsor? Are they going to build a tunnel under the Gardiner to alleviate congestion? I don't know. Will they bring back or consider ranked ballots, right, considering what happened with Cynthia Lai this time? So, the time to be bold is now.
When we talk about voter engagement, when we put the lens on the Jane and Finch neighborhood, that is often characterized as an area that has some of the lowest voter turnouts in the city, with just 1/3 of people casting a ballot. And the citizens in the northwest end of the city often feel that they're ignored by politicians unless there's a crisis of some sort. So did this election drive more people to the polls? Dale Manuktuk of CBC Toronto's Jane and Finch Community Bureau is at Jane and Finch right now. Dale, I know you've been working at Jane and Finch for a couple of months now. Tell me about the municipal issues that are resonating with people living and working there.
Yeah, Jill, I'm in the Jane and Finch Mall parking lot. I'm separated by a construction fence. On the other side of that fence are those rows of those orange barricades. There's excavators that don't have people in them yet. This intersection is normally bustling, and it's all for the construction of the Finch West LRT. And we know that with transit infrastructure comes new condo developments and rising property values, and that is driving rental prices up in this low-income neighborhood, an average household income of just over $60,000, which is well below the city average of over $100,000. So residents are already being priced out of the community. We did a story a couple of weeks ago about rental prices, specifically one-bedroom units that are frequently leasing out for over $1,900 a month. And compared to downtown, that might seem like a deal, but it has a more profound impact on this community given the economic profile of the ward. So the candidates, they have various solutions for tackling housing affordability. Amanda Coombs and incumbent Anthony Peruza are pretty much on the same page in terms of ensuring that there are affordable components in all new developments that come into the area. And Christopher Mamaliti, the outgoing school board trustee, he wants to see rent to own structures within Toronto community housing. There are over 2,500 units, TCH units in Ward 7, with over 7,000 people living in them. So he'd like to see that get done. And that's essentially what is top of mind for all voters in this area.
We've talked about this election as being a low-key one, but were voters engaged in the campaigns in any ways in that community?
Well, from the people that I've spoken with, and between 150 and 200 people over my time here, I wouldn't say that they were very engaged. There are certain pockets, just like there are in every area of the city, that are engaged, and they're usually at community events, which Anthony Peruza definitely capitalized on. He ran a very similar campaign to John Tory, running on his record, having repaired roads and sewers in the area, more property tax rebates for seniors, as opposed to Amanda Coombs and Christopher Mamaliti, who really ran ground games. Amanda Coombs tells me she knocked on some 10,000 doors. She held 20 campaign events. She went to 40 to 50 community events. And that wasn't really Christopher Mamaliti's strategy. He says he engaged with almost every resident in the ward. And when I spoke to him yesterday, he was actually still knocking on doors. And so Anthony Peruza, he feels very confident. Your previous guest talked about the power of incumbency, and Anthony Peruza's campaign feels very confident. They already have their victory party location picked out on Tangiers Road. But Christopher Mamaliti says that based on voter engagement on the advanced polls, which was about 20% down, he says there will probably be about 15,000 votes coming out of this ward, and 8,000 votes might get it done.
All right, Dale Manuktuk, thank you for this. Dale Manuktuk is a CBC Toronto reporter working out of CBC Toronto's Jane and Finch Community Bureau. We're now about 15 minutes after 8 o'clock, and there are no results. It's like we started the party and nobody's come yet. So we're waiting for the polls to open. We know that once the results come in, they will come in fast and furious. And as soon as they do, we will let you know. But in the meantime, we'll continue the conversation about the campaign and about the distinction between John Tory and his nearest opponent, Gil Penaloza. Many refer to Gil Penaloza as a dreamer, somebody who had big ideas about what the city of Toronto could be. How much of an influence is that going to have on the next 4 years at Toronto City Council? Those kinds of debates and conversations.
Jill, I think he had just so many ideas that he was trying to gain traction with throughout the campaign. Really everything from a safe streets platform to how to build more affordable housing, a very detailed plan for a bus. And he was stressing that all of this stuff is affordable. It could be done right away. You wouldn't need a lot of money to do it. And I think he was trying to make that pitch with the bounds of what we know about the city's budget, which is in pretty dire shape. We've got an $857 million budget deficit. And that has to be filled by law, by the city council. It'll be one of the first things I have to tackle. So Mr. Penaloza was trying to be this dreamer, but at the same time, also trying to respond to the budget constraints that I think he saw in front of him. Whether city council takes this up and tries to incorporate some of his ideas, I don't know, but they are there.
We promised you numbers. We have numbers, not from 416, but 905 is coming through for us. Linda, what are the numbers?
We do have some first numbers coming in from Brampton, Jill, with 10 of 160 locations reporting. Patrick Brown off to a roaring start with about 2,500 votes over Nikki Kaur in the Brampton mayoral race there. And in Mississauga, no surprise here, but Bonnie Crombie is off to a massive lead, 3,300 votes over second place candidate David Shaw, but only about 4.8% of the polls reporting. But we do expect those numbers, of course, to grow. We're still waiting on results from the City of Toronto. No explanation from the city as yet, but we do expect them to be coming in shortly.
We hope no one pulled the plug. We would like to see those numbers, and we'd like to see them soon. But certainly the results that we're seeing, the early results from Mississauga and Brampton, speak to that idea of the power of the incumbency.
Absolutely. I mean, Bonnie Crombie is far and away the person with the most incumbent advantage out there. She had the endorsement of Hazel McCallion, who, of course, is the incumbent of incumbents. And I think it's fair to say that Mayor Crombie was probably going to roll to re-election. We'll see where that ends at the end of the night. But yeah, absolutely. She's really off to quite a lead here.
When we move into the territory of the strong mayor powers and we look at incumbents like Patrick Brown and Bonnie Crombie, where is that going to sit in terms of their leadership?
Well, that's an interesting thought. I know Doug Ford has essentially said that, soon enough, both of those municipalities will be vested with that same power. So it really depends on the dynamics of council themselves, right? So if the mayors feel essentially challenged in a way that they can't get their mandates through, and it again aligns with provincial priorities, then of course I could see them being tempted to want to use it. And that accounts for both of them, especially Patrick Brown. That's an interesting one as well. He's gone through, ups and downs, I will say, and this may present an opportunity for him again. It's that idea about being bold and taking on those challenges of the province and owning them. He may do that because I think there will be some contentiousness or contention at least on that council.
Well, we know there is some dysfunction when it comes to the relationships around the table at Brampton City Council, but what about his relationship with Premier Ford? How does that play out?
It's not great. I think that's fair to say. And they've, I think, tried to make it work over the years. But, it feels as though Patrick Brown is sort of fighting fights on a lot of different fronts. He's fighting fights in Brampton, in the municipality, but then he's also a conservative politician who desperately has ambitions to seek higher office in that party and was disqualified in the conservative race the federal Conservative leadership race came back to run, caused a lot of waves, and his competition, Nikki Kaur, is really taking him to task for that.
Well, you are listening to Toronto Votes on CBC Radio 1. And the CBC News Decision Desk is projecting that John Tory will win the Toronto mayoral race. This will be his third term as mayor of the city. Again, the CBC Decision Desk projecting that John Tory will serve another 4 years, his third term as Toronto's mayor. We know that he had a strong level of support. What do you expect to hear right off the bat from John Tory as he begins another term?
I think it will be exactly what we have heard over the course of the campaign, Jill. My sense is that he is going to say, we must continue to do the work that we have done over the past 8 years to build transit, more work to build affordable housing, and to effectively lead the city through this financial crisis that it faces. I don't think we're going to hear anything really truly different from the mayor, but that's what he's pitching. That's what he has put out in front of voters, and clearly they've endorsed him for a third term.
Well, the numbers are starting to trickle in. Go to Linda Ward.
Yeah, Jill, just on those 7 wards that we've been watching here, we do have numbers. Etobicoke North, Vince Crisanti has a big lead there. In Ward 9, Davenport, Alejandra Bravo has quite a large lead on the next in line for that seat. In Spadina, Fort York, Ozma Malik seems to be leading there. And in University Rosedale, we have a little bit of a dead heat there between Norm D. Pasquale and Diane Sachs. Obviously, it's not over yet, but they are neck and neck. Toronto Centre, Chris Moyes is leading. And in Don Valley East, former councillor John Burnside has taken the lead there in the early going. In Willowdale, Lily Chang is in the lead. And in Scarborough North, of course, we were talking about Cynthia Lai's ward, where we know that the votes that were counted for her were not going to count. But Jamal Myers is leading there. And on the website, at least, it's listed as 0, the number of votes for Cynthia Lai. Of course, they're not obviously counting those ones today.
I'd like to talk a little bit about Etobicoke North, because this is a bit of history in play with this election, because it means that after a number of years, there will not be a Ford sitting at the table at Toronto City Council. How much of a difference is that going to make in terms of the personality of council?
I think it will make a difference. Certainly, there were the Ford era of Toronto politics at the city was very colorful, to say the least. Michael Ford he's not the same sort of politician that his uncles were, but I think if you're just to look at it from the perspective, if Vince Crisanti is to carry this ward, his politics aren't that different than Michael Ford or the Fords. He's on the conservative side. He's really he's run a campaign where he stressed that he's there to be a really good customer service ward representative. So I don't know if it'll change that much if he actually wins that ward.
If he's on the conservative side, then does that mean that he's a candidate that John Tory can rely on regularly?
So that's interesting. People sometimes think it's a direct swap, and in this case it is. However, it's more of a swing vote. It isn't necessarily a total hard vote for Tory. Tory will have to do his work to ensure that Crisanti is on side in order to get his votes passed.
The CBC Decision Desk is now projecting that Bonnie Crombie will be re-elected as the mayor of Mississauga tonight. Again, the CBC Decision Desk projecting that Bonnie Crombie will be elected mayor of Mississauga this evening. And Victoria, that goes back to that issue of incumbency and the strength of that when it comes to voters when they get behind the ballot box and have to make that decision.
Absolutely. Being an incumbent has tremendous power. What we know is that Toronto is actually one of the most advantageous places for incumbency in North America. We know that those who are incumbents sit in office for an average of 13.8 years and that their success rate is 90%. This speaks to a few different things, of course. This speaks to name recognition. This speaks to, a record of service. But it also sometimes hampers innovation. It sometimes hampers new voice, additional representation, and a whole bunch of other things that are extraordinarily important to the modernization and advancement of cities as well.
So Bonnie Crombie back as the mayor of Mississauga. Let's go back to Linda Ward to see if we have any new results so far.
Yeah, we know Patrick Brown is extending his lead in Brampton. He has more than 15,000 votes ahead of Nikki Kaur. I'm also watching Etobicoke Lakeshore here. It seems Mark Grimes might be in for a fight tonight. Amber Morley is leading there. Also watching Scarborough Centre. We know Deputy Mayor Michael Thompson has been in a bit of a controversy during the election campaign. He was accused of sexual assault, although not convicted. But this definitely put a crimp in his style during the election campaign. Michael Thompson is leading in Scarborough Centre, so it does not seem to have affected his chances of getting reelected there. And yeah, we're still watching as more of these are coming in fast and furious. Here, Joe.
The CBC decision desk projecting John Tory will be mayor for a third term in the city of Toronto. Ali Chiasson is at the Tory headquarters tonight. Ali, give me a sense of whether or not the celebrations have already begun.
Jill, I got to tell you, about a minute ago, the room here at the Royal York really erupted. People are cheering, wooing, handshaking, all of that good stuff. But I also took a look at some of his strategists who are in the room. They are all huddling together and they're all on their phones, surely crafting some of the messaging that Mayor John Tory will be preparing. He's actually not in this room right now in the ballroom at the Royal York. He is in a private room surrounded by close friends and family where he's been watching the results come in all night. So he is expected to take to the podium in about 10 or 15 minutes, and that's where we will hear from him, re-elected a third time as mayor, now becoming the longest-serving mayor in recent Toronto history. So that's big news. We'll see how he wraps that into his victory speech here tonight, and we will be carrying that live. Send it back to you, Jill.
All right. Thank you, Ali. The CBC's Ali Chiasson at John Tory headquarters this evening. Let's turn things back over to Linda Ward.
Yeah, Jill, I'm looking at Parkdale High Park here, and it seems it's a bit of a three-way split here between Gord Perks, Chamilamo, and Siri Agrawal. They're, 26 to 34% of the vote between them, with 55 of 70 polls reporting. In Spadina, Fort York, Ozma Malik is in the lead, with April Engelberg coming up second in that race. It looks like Toronto Centre, Chris Moyes has really got quite the edge there, nearly 50% of the vote, with almost all polls reporting ahead of Nikki Ward in second place. And Paula Fletcher obviously has taken, it looks like, quite the jump ahead of the next place in Toronto. Danforth, 73% of the vote. So definitely no surprise there, as well as Josh Matlow, two incumbents that had been widely expected to be returning to City Hall.
Well, the CBC decision desk is projecting that Patrick Brown will be re-elected as the mayor of Brampton. Patrick Brown projected to serve another term as the mayor of Brampton with more than 50% of the votes counted. Brown has more than 25,000 votes, more than 60 of the ballots cast. The next closest contestant, Nikki Kaur, has more than 10,000 votes. That's about 24% of the ballots cast. So again, the CBC decision desk is projecting that Patrick Brown will be re-elected as mayor of Brampton, but it can't be an easy ride for Patrick Brown in the 4 years ahead.
No, I think one of the things that is really different about this level of politics is that you have to build coalitions and you have to get your votes passed. The mayor, in other municipalities other than Toronto and Ottawa, is only one vote, remains that way. So Patrick Brown will have to lead that council by consensus. He'll have to build a coalition. He'll have to build bridges. And that feels like a pretty hard task.
Although, as Andrew's suggesting, he certainly will step up in line in terms of those strong mayor powers, right? Because once you give it to Toronto and Ottawa, there are other jurisdictions can make a very strong case for exactly the same thing. So I guess the question is Doug Ford prepared to hear those arguments?
Yeah, I have to wonder, because Patrick has done so many things and run at so many levels, and I think he's checked every box now politically that he could do except for leadership, but he's tried to kick at the can there too. I have to wonder, though, he will now probably want to set a legacy of some sort other than running for different levels of government. So, using those stronger mayoral powers, he may create a coalition with Doug. I know that relationship has had its ups and downs as well, but maybe he will do that in order to be able to align with those provincial priorities of housing and infrastructure and transit and come out with a strong legacy.
Once again, the CBC Decision Desk is projecting that Patrick Brown will serve another term as mayor of Brampton. Our Megan Fitzpatrick is in Brampton tonight at Patrick Brown headquarters. Hello, Megan.
Hi, Jill. Yeah, there's a pretty full room here, and someone's just at the podium now introducing the evening and saying they are just awaiting the results, and they're going to announce it to the crowd here, I think. So the crowd is quieting down now to listen to the results. I'm just going to listen in here. I expect the crowd will erupt in a cheer momentarily, Jill, when they hear what the results are. Let's listen.
With 61% of the cast ballots right now at 29,321 votes and counting, guys.
Okay, there you go, Jill. So you can hear the crowd in the room. Very excited to hear that, of course. Lots of supporters here. They've been milling about and eating some food and awaiting Patrick Brown's arrival. He's not in the room yet. That's not to be expected until the results have officially been announced, but we do expect him to make his way in here. His campaign manager is here. I did speak to him earlier, Jill, and he did tell me they were feeling quite comfortable about tonight, and it will be interesting, though, to watch, what the final results are in terms of how much of the vote Patrick Brown captured. In 2018, he captured 44% of the vote, and he had been saying during this campaign he wanted an even bigger mandate. So we'll see if he gets that once all of the votes are counted. But Patrick Brown said earlier today he ran a positive campaign that he was proud of, and was urging people here in Brampton to give him a second shot, and it looks like they have done that, Jill.
All right, Megan Fitzpatrick, thanks so much. Megan Fitzpatrick at Patrick Brown's headquarters in Brampton, the CBC Decision Desk, projecting that Patrick Brown will serve another term as mayor of Brampton. And while tonight is a night for celebration, the reality settles in tomorrow about what the council is going to look like in Brampton. How is Patrick Brown going to work with a council that prior to this was divided and fractured, the infighting? How does he move forward and create that kind of legacy agenda that we talked about, Sean?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think you probably have to focus in on the issues. I know that post-secondary education and putting a campus of some kind up in Brampton has been really key, and perhaps it's an issue that everyone can rally around. I mean, it seems hard to think that there'd be objections to having something like that in the city. It just they have to find the right place and the right partners. It seems like that's been a bit elusive at this point, but perhaps that's what has to happen up there.
In Hamilton, we're being told, and we have a message from the city manager's office, that no ballots are going to be counted in Hamilton until the final polling station closes, and that's not until 9:20, so about 45 minutes from now. We have our eyes on Hamilton, of course, because the former leader of the NDP in the province of Ontario, Andrea Horwath, is running for mayor. It is an interesting race. She has a number of high-profile candidates to oppose or at least to defeat in order to make her path to that chair.
That's right. I mean, it's one of the races in the province that has got these really marquee candidates. You've got Keenan Lomas, the Chamber of Commerce CEO, or former CEO. You've got Horvath, of course, who's quite a known quantity, and Bob Bertina, rather, the former mayor, who's trying to make a comeback. So that's a star-studded ballot on just about any night of a municipal election, and I'll be very eager to see once those ballots are counted up who wins that race.
Well, you better cool your heels. You're not going to find out until 20 after 9.
Jumping at the bit for that one, Jill.
All right, let's go to Linda Ward to see what we do know at this point.
Okay, Jill, so we're looking at one really interesting race that's heating up here. York Southwestern. Of course, this is the seat that's been long held by Francis Nunziata. We are looking at a neck-and-neck race here between Nunziata and Chiara Padovani. Actually, Padovani had been in the lead there for some time, but it seems Nunziata has taken that lead back. So it's really just a couple hundred votes between them there. And right now in Scarborough North, it looks like all polls, or most of the polls, have been reported. 33 out of 38 with Jamal Myers with about 50% of the vote there. So going quite well for him out there in Scarborough North, despite some pretty sad circumstances.
Well, fascinating in York Southwestern, because I have to be honest, I can't remember a Toronto City Council without Francis Nunziata. And when we talked about the power of incumbency, is that working against her tonight?
You know, I think it's a couple of things. I think you've got a candidate out there in Chiara Padovani who is running a very aggressive ground game. I was out with her during this last push over the weekend, and she's got a team, and they were working incredibly efficiently to just, frankly, knock on as many doors as they possibly could over the weekend. And I know that Nunziata's team was out as well over the weekend doing that same work, and it just makes you wonder if, frankly, one of these ground games is just going to eke the other out.
I don't know. Nunziata is so well loved by her community and by the stakeholders as well. And of course, John Tory relies on her as an ally. So if Francis doesn't make it this time, that's a real loss to John Tory and this next council.
Well, she's the Speaker of Council. She's been held that position since 2010. So if you go and watch council meetings, you know, she's front and center. Of course, the sister of former Member of Parliament, John Nunziata. Victoria, what do you make of those numbers from York Southwestern?
You know, I think we're going to see a couple of things more broadly, which is a mixture of people wanting a steady hand that can help stay the course, and then people wanting new emergent voices, policies, and ideas. And I think Padovani's done a really good job of telling those stories, of communicating and connecting on a grassroots level, and articulating a vision that seems to be resonating with people. And, you know, this is the work of engagement. This is the work of everyday politics. And, you know, people are, showing up for her and aligning with that vision.
Let's go back to Linda Ward for some results. Linda.
Yeah, Jill, I'm just looking at North Toronto now. Don Valley North, as we mentioned, Shelley Carroll still in the lead there with almost all polls reporting about 72% of the vote. In Humber River, Black Creek, Anthony Peruzza, looks like he might hold on to this seat. There had been quite an interesting race going on there between him and Christopher Mamalidi, but there's a huge gap between the two of them right now with Peruzza still in the lead. In Willowdale, Lily Cheng has taken a good gap there between her and Marcus O'Brien Fair. So she is still leading there, and only about 7 polls left to report. So that looks good for Lily Cheng. And in York Centre, James Pasternak, 73.4% of the vote. I can't imagine this going any other way, Jill, but there you have it. That's your North Toronto wards.
Look, like the incumbent is on his way to victory, but I really want to touch on what's going on in Willowdale, because despite the endorsement from the incumbent, John Fillion, O'Brien Fair is falling behind Lily Cheng.
That's right. You know, I think Lily Cheng is another good example of someone who's got a really good grassroots machine. You know, she's the executive director of a food bank. She has the very popular Facebook North York Moms group, and I think she's really been able to mobilize volunteers. She's been able to get her game out there, her ground game out there to get her vote in.
And will she bring a different vote to council than Fillion did?
That's a great question. I mean, she has pushed back against some homeless shelters in the ward, and she's trying to propose a different model there. It's a different position than Fillion, but I don't know if her politics are really that different from his specifically. But we'll have to see her in action, I think.
All right, you're listening to Toronto Votes on CBC Radio 1. I'm Jill Dempsey. The CBC Decision Desk is projecting Bonnie Crombie back for another term in Mississauga. Patrick Brown back for another term in Brampton. John Tory back for his third term in the city of Toronto. Linda Ward is watching all the numbers roll in. Bring us up to date, Linda.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Etobicoke now, Jill. In Etobicoke Centre, it seems the Holiday name is paying off out there. Etobicoke Centre, Stephen Holiday in a huge lead with almost all polls reporting in Etobicoke North. We've been talking about Vince Crisanti. He has held on to quite a good lead there. And in Etobicoke Lakeshore, this is that race we're talking about between incumbent Mark Grimes and Amber Morley. And it looks like Amber Morley has overtaken Mark Grimes by about 2,000 votes.
She has a good ground game, Amber Morley, going into this campaign.
Yes, she really does. I was out with her also at the end of the week, and I mean, it's a huge ward, and she's got a very organized team. She got an endorsement from Progress Toronto, right? This left-leaning third-party advertising group. Clearly, she's got their support as well, and they're helping her turn her vote out.
And so, how does that make a difference? That kind of endorsement?
You know, I think really what it helps with is signs, volunteers, people to physically staff your campaign, because you can't do it alone. Even if you're the most charismatic candidate out there, you've got to have people knocking on doors and doing the hard work about getting flyers in front of people, having those conversations, even if it's not the candidate.
And, one would think that might be what holds some people back from running for municipal office, is the amount of money and the amount of effort and the amount of work that it takes in order to run. But it's interesting in this campaign because you have wide open spaces, and from my vantage point, that seems to have opened the door for people to even consider a career in politics who may not have in the past.
It's interesting with Amber, too. She worked at the city, so she understands the nuances and the process. And she did give Grimes a run last time in 2018 as well. She created a good name recognition and as you said, that ground game. And the swell of volunteers with the Progress endorsement is definitely there. So, this is not necessarily surprising, but Grimes is a definite ally to Tory. So there are some changes happening here on council, even with Lily Chang. I do think she didn't have a Toronto Progress Toronto endorsement. I wonder if she'll be a swing vote. So, yeah, it's just the dynamics are playing out a little bit differently this time.
What do you think about the dynamics, Victoria?
I want us to rethink dynamics entirely, actually, and think in less like polarized ways. I think that, Mayor Tory might be able to see people who are new to council or perhaps not seen as a traditional ally as a strong complement, someone to debate ideas, have healthy tension, look at perspectives differently, and really do, collective decision-making, consensus building on the hard work of politics. Ultimately, they need to get through all of this to advance important policies on behalf of all of the people. And so I hope we can put different lenses on everything.
But with a third term in, is he likely to do that, Sean?
I think it's worth pointing out that the mayor has done that to a great extent. And it came out a lot during the pandemic. I mean, I think you need only look as far as his partnership with Joe Cressy, who is certainly on the left progressive side of council, chair of the Board of Health, and he became a key ally of sorts for Tory during the pandemic. And I mean, obviously, you want everyone working together during a global health crisis. But I also think that the two of them were able to, really work together pretty closely in a way that maybe you wouldn't have seen, or expected, perhaps, going into the term. So right. I think it's a really reasonable point, Victoria. And at council, when there's no specific party allegiances, at least outwardly, there's the opportunity to have people reach across aisles and pull these swing votes in.
Well, you have something as extraordinary as a pandemic. It certainly can change alliances and perspectives politically as you try to get through it together.
That's right.
Let's go back to Linda Ward and take a look at those numbers.
Yeah, Jill, I'm just watching some really, really close races here, keeping an eye. It looks like in Parkdale High Park, it's now a two-way race between Gord Perks and Chemilamo. Very close there. Gord Perks is in the lead. We have about 8 polls left to report there, but it's pretty tight. And then when we look to University Rosedale, neck and neck between TDSB trustee Norb DePasquale or TCDSB rather, and Diane Sachs, former environment commissioner. We have like 1% of the vote between them right at this moment in time. And we're still watching York Southweston, that ward held by Francis Nunziata for so long, 0.5% of the vote, but it is now Chiara Padovani in the lead.
So there's some real challenges to the incumbents tonight, perhaps something that a lot of people thought they wouldn't see. What is it about the Gord Perks race in Parkdale High Park? Why is that so close at this point?
You know, my guess is that you've got 3 strong candidates there. Chemilamo, Syria Grell, who, of course, is the former Tory staffer, former staffer to Kathleen Wynne, and Perks himself. I mean, they've run very strong campaigns, all 3 of them, and it's a close race as a result. It's really interesting. I think street safety has emerged as a real key issue in that ward, and clearly the vote is showing up. They're interested.
And University Rosedale, another tight race there between Diane Sachs and Norm DePasquale.
What's really interesting to me about those results is that Robin Buxton Potts does not appear to have done quite as well as maybe we thought, or those of us who are closely watching the race thought might be. It's really become a two-way race between DePasquale and Diane Sachs, and that looks like it's going right down to the wire.
So we talked a lot about voter engagement. What do these tight races say to you? Let's start with Victoria.
Well, actually, High Park Parkdale is my own home ward. And what I can tell you from having followed things extremely closely there is that we're actually seeing really good user experience, I think, in how they're running their campaigns. You go on these websites, you can actually see my plan, my goals for High Park Parkdale, and actually give people a sense of, seeing a new vision. It's also a very environmentally conscious ward as well. And so I think that really speaking to the priorities of the people is actually what gets them out and gets them voting. And so I think that's resonating with those residents specifically.
Angela?
I have to wonder with Perks, because he did come out and say that he wasn't going to run in 2026. And sometimes that can spur other, candidates to really get out there and really be hungry for it and try to make a name for themselves. So I have to wonder if that dynamic didn't happen in this particular race.
We're waiting to hear from John Tory. The CBC Decision Desk is projecting John Tory as Toronto's next mayor for a third term, actually. John Tory is expected to speak at 9 o'clock. We will bring you that live in about 13 minutes from now. In the city of Vaughan, we're looking at a bit of a nail biter because City Councillor Sandra Young-Rocco is still leading former Ontario Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca, but only by 275 votes. Del Duca it was a devastating loss that he experienced in June as the leader of the Liberal Party. And I can't imagine what he's thinking now looking at these numbers tonight.
Yeah, it's such a good point, Jill. I mean, when you put your name on a ballot, it's a pretty difficult proposition. And even with the name recognition that Stephen Del Duca had and the key endorsement that he had from outgoing Mayor Maurizio Bevilacqua, it's still close. And boy, this would be a pretty big loss for him.
Closer than you expected?
Definitely.
It's interesting. We are also watching the race in Hamilton because another former party leader in the province is running for mayor, and that's Andrea Horvath for mayor of the city of Hamilton. But we have been told that no ballots are going to be counted until the polls close at 9:20. So we'll see if we can get those numbers in while we're still on air. But that's why you haven't heard any numbers yet about Andrea Horvath. Let's go back to some numbers in Linda Ward.
Yeah, Jill, I'm taking a look at Scarborough here, and all I can say is it seems that the people of Scarborough are very happy with their representation.
Done.
A lot of success for the incumbents out there. Looking at Michael Thompson with a good lead in Scarborough Centre. Of course, we spoke about Scarborough North with Jamal Myers stepping into that seat there. It looks good for him with only 2 polls left to report. In Scarborough Southwest, Gary Crawford is in the lead, but not a huge lead. Parthy Candeval in second place, but only behind by about 1,200 votes. So quite a good showing there. In Scarborough Agincourt, Nick Mantis, the incumbent there, with about 50% of the vote and counting. And in Scarborough Guildwood, Paul Ainsley with a huge lead. Scarborough Rouge Park certainly looks good for Jennifer McKelvey. 40 out of 48 polls reporting 73% of the vote.
Somebody at the desk is happy about that tonight. Angela?
Yeah, just a little bit. Jen works hard. It's good. It's good to see that. I'm glad that residents in Scarborough are really mobilized to go out and vote. I will say something interesting, an interesting data point about the Mantis versus Mantis. So in 1997, which I do realize I was in grade 7 at the time, but Peter...
I don't want to hear it.
Peter Tabbins versus Peter Tabbins, exact same thing. But in that case, Peter Tabbins, the real one, he actually lost, right, by 989 votes. That's not playing out in this scenario tonight, but it was a similar situation where a resident changed their name to be able to run there, essentially to just siphon vote off of the leading contender.
Another interesting result that's coming in tonight, when we have the conversation about strong mayor powers, we know that so far it's Toronto is designated, Ottawa is designated. The incumbent Jim Watson not running. The CBC decision desk is projecting that Mark Sutcliffe will be elected mayor of Ottawa tonight. Angela, you're nodding your head. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, well, that was an interesting race. The polling throughout the entire campaign indicated that it was a neck-and-neck race with Catherine McKenney, right? But Mark, again, seen more as a centrist candidate. I think he appealed not just to the urban voters, but Ottawa has an interesting dynamic with the rural voters as well. So I think he had more of a broad cross appeal for those two subsections. So
he certainly has a lot of work to do because in the middle of the hearings about what happened in Ottawa in February with the convoy, the reaction of police, he's got a lot of rebuilding to do.
It's in some respects it's almost like the situation that Brown faces where he's got to he'll have to really try to build coalitions and move the city on after this crisis that took place there, and it's loomed large over the election. It's a big task ahead for Mark Sutcliffe.
So the CBC decisions desk, the mayor-elect for Ottawa, Mark Sutcliffe. Linda Ward, bring us up to date on what's going on.
Yeah, Jill, I'm just taking a look again at some of these really, really tight races. Let's take a look at Etobicoke Lakeshore again. Amber Morley still in the lead there against incumbent Mark Grimes. We're also I'm just gonna scroll through some of these numbers here. But in University Rosedale, we're watching that one still. Norm DePasquale, Diane Sachs. We've got, 200 votes between them. So we're really, really close in that. And there's 8 polls left to report tonight. And in York Southwest and Kira Padavani still ahead of Francis Nunziata by about, 40 votes. It could go either way.
That might very well be the shocker of the night.
It might.
For many people. Just because of her length of tenure at Toronto City Council.
Yeah, I think you could go with Etobicoke Lakeshore too, but the margin there in York Southwestern is really something. Wow. What do you say?
We are waiting to hear from Mayor John Tory, expected to speak at 9 o'clock. And I say Mayor John Tory because the CBC decision desk is projecting that he will serve another term as mayor of Toronto, his third term. The other race that we're really watching tonight is Davenport and Alejandro Bravo. Hayden Waters is there tonight at her headquarters. Hayden, what is the feeling there tonight?
We are just outside. There's some excitement. Just about to hit the stage for some speeches here, but we're just outside. I don't think anyone's seen you yet here, so there's excitement going to happen in a moment. But I'm standing here with our candidate tonight, and a huge win for you. This is your fifth kick at the can. How is it feeling in terms of how are you feeling right now?
It feels great to win with such a huge mandate. I think the progressive people in this community want a voice and a vote at council, and at a really crucial time for the city. The city is facing an affordability crisis in housing, the transit problems, the climate crisis, inequality, and we know that the voice of Davenport is going to really make a difference at Toronto City Council.
And what's some of the stuff you're hearing at the doors?
You know, that mostly that people know me, they know that they can rely on me. I don't give up. I stand with them, and I've done work on so many different issues with so many different groups. They're excited, and they're really. I felt that there was an energy behind this candidacy and this campaign, and there are a lot of people in there who want to celebrate, and we know that there's a lot of more work to do immediately after this party.
Alejandro, congratulations. Hayden, can I ask a question?
Indeed, you can.
All right. Alejandro, congratulations. It's Jill Dempsey back at the CBC studio. What do you think your first order of business will be?
By far, the most important thing that the city needs is real solutions on affordable housing, more housing, housing that people can afford, building more, transferring housing into not-for-profit hands so that renters are protected. And, you know, that is actually climate action. You know, better housing means that we're going to actually cut emissions. And better housing and more housing means that we're going to have to invest in transit. So it's not just one thing, it's a lot of things. But more importantly, it's, you know, right now, the Office of the Councillor is a really important platform and opportunity for residents and for civil society groups to work with champions on the inside. And with all of the new people elected at council who are progressive and community embedded, I'm excited to vote at City Council.
All right. I appreciate your time. Alexander Bravo, thank you. Hayden Waters, thank you very much. At Davenport, we should mention that Alexander is in the lead. We haven't projected a final result for her yet, but I think the numbers are fairly substantial in terms of that lead, right, Linda Ward?
Yeah, she's got 70.9% of the vote. That amounts to about 16,000 votes. The next in line, Grant Gonzalez, with 3,124 votes. And there's only 3 polls left to report.
All right. We're sort of walking a bit on the edge, but, you know, we think she's just about through the doors at Toronto City Council. Mayor John Tory expected to speak in about 4 minutes' time. John Tory will be taking on his third term as Toronto mayor. Is it going to be his last, Sean?
Oh, great question. I mean, he said yes, that it would seem...
Said that before.
Yes, he said it's unlikely that he would seek another mandate. But he, as you point out, he did say it before. And I think that he will probably get towards the end of this mandate and reevaluate, right? And look at the land, the lay of the land. How much has he been able to accomplish with these strong mayor powers? What kind of legacy project has he got back that, you know, lined up? There'll be a lot of calculations, I think.
How much did the pandemic have to do with his change of heart, do you think, Victoria?
I think it probably had a lot to do with his change of heart. At the end of the day, he didn't get to do as much as he did because as he wanted to do, because obviously we were faced with the pandemic. It was a real-time global issue that deserved and demanded real-time solutions. And so policies, everything had to be, you know, shifted over to that. And so I think a big part of the motivation to seek another term is to really create that legacy that he's after, to do the important things that were really part of his mandate, you know, prior to the pandemic, to really see it through. And, you know, I think he's got a tremendous opportunity to focus on inclusive city building and to focus on building an inclusive economy as well.
So, Angela, what would be the ultimate legacy for John Tory?
Well, that's a good question, Jill. So he as a consensus leader, and I think he's always been like that ever since he worked at Rogers, now is in a position to be bold. But is he going to be bold in support of provincial priorities, or is he going to focus on the councillor priorities that instead? Because there's a bit of a shift to the left here, especially if Amber gets in. There's a lot of swing votes. It's shaping up that way. 2018, he had a solid 14 votes. Right now, top of count for me, he's got 12. So, and you need 14 votes to win any item at council. So, he'll need to definitely decide which angle he's going to go, provincial or more focused on the left.
And how aligned is he with Doug Ford?
Well, they both come from conservative circles, but I would say that, Tory is very much more pragmatic. Doug is more action-oriented. But maybe that is the marrying of the two that creates these bold visions and actually gets things done. And it's interesting, too, because the left will not be against wanting to build housing. But, that means working with the development community. That means working with companies. And you often get a lot of pushback from the left side of council on the, interacting with and partnering with those.
And we have
groups.
to mention Doug Ford as part of this conversation simply because of those strong mayor powers and the perception that many have about the awarding of those powers to Ottawa and then Toronto specifically. How is that going to change the legacy for John Tory?
Jill, I just want to make one mention here, just to think back and how extraordinary it is that Tory and Ford are in this conversation right now. They ran against each other in 2014. There was no love lost between the two of them at that point. And clearly they've been able to rebuild a bridge and create a working relationship. So I think that's going to be the way they move going forward, and it'll just be a question of, does the city's priorities and Tory's priorities do they get big-footed by Doug Ford and his priorities at the provincial level through these strong mayor powers?
Well, that's what we need to see, is if there's going to be some compatibility there in terms of interest. It's so funny that you bring up 2014, because that's when we saw great voter turnout, right? We had this really dynamic race between John Tory and Doug Ford, and it was like 60.4% turnout. I'm not sure we're going to see that tonight.
I'm going to be really interested to see that number, just based on the lower voter turnout to the advanced polls, around 7% less than the advanced polls last time around. I expect that trend might hold. I'd be happy to be proven wrong.
So we're waiting for John Tory, expected to come up to speak in about a minute or two. Let's go back to Linda Ward.
Yeah, Jill, as we come to the top of the hour, let's just take a look back at some of those open wards and how those have been going. In Etobicoke North, we still have, with only four polls left to count there, Vince Crescenti is leading there. We heard from Alejandro Bravo in Davenport with a huge 70% of the vote lead. Spadina Fort York, Ozma Malik is holding that lead, and we are only waiting on 4 polls to report there, so that looks good for her.
Okay.
In University, Rosedale, Norm DePasquale and Diane Sachs still duking it out with only 8 polls left. We'll have to see which way that goes. And Toronto Centre, Chris Moyes leading in a big way in Toronto Centre. Don Valley East, John Burnside, former councillor, more than double the number of votes over Stephen Kayazik, and 12 polls left to count. And of course, we spoke about Lily Cheng in Willowdale, 4 polls left, a good lead over Marcus O'Brien Fair. And in Scarborough North, Jamal Myers is leading there.
Well, talk about your tight races. Let's go to Vaughan, where Sandra Young-Rocco is now leading Stephen Del Duca by 518 votes, with 32 of 133 tabulators reporting. So, almost 42,000 votes have been counted. We still have a ways to go, but a difficult night at this point for Stephen Del Duca, probably hoping for a much stronger showing out of the gate.
No doubt. I mean, I think you can't underestimate the profile of Sandra Young-Rocco up in Vaughan as well. She was a councillor there for a long time. I mean, it's not that she was an unknown quantity herself. I mean, she was a formidable opponent to Stephen Del Duca. And, even with, as I said, even with that endorsement from Maurizio Bevilacqua, she's really edging out here. Yeah.
All right. So Stephen Del Duca, of course, is the leader of the Liberal Party, resigned on election night in June after a devastating showing for his party. Andrea Horvath is the other provincial party leader that is now trying to get back into municipal politics. She's running for the mayor of Hamilton. We are being told that the votes will not be released in Hamilton till about 20 after 9. So hopefully we'll have some sense of how that race is shaping up as we go to Hamilton at about that time. So we've got another 15 minutes to go before we get the votes from Hamilton. We are waiting for John Tory to speak. The CBC Decision Desk is projecting that he will lead Toronto for another term, his third, another 4 years for John Tory. Other incumbent mayors that were re-elected or projected re-elected tonight, Patrick Brown in Brampton, Bonnie Crombie in Mississauga, and of course, John Tory in the city of Toronto. A lot of discussion about John Tory and his legacy, and the question of Gil Penaloza, his nearest competitor in this campaign. Will some of those ideas resurface, resonate, come forward in the next 4 years? Will we see a sit down between John Tory and Gil Penaloza, Victoria?
You know, I really hope so, because a good idea should never go to waste. And at the end of the day, campaigns are where we see ambitious policies, excellent innovations and visions of different kinds of people. And though Gil Penaloza and John Tory may be opponents tonight, tomorrow they will stop being opponents, and they'll continue being people who love the city very much and think very deeply about it. So my hope is that the mayor will call on Gil Penaloza, pick up some of those great ideas. But you know what? It's also a call to action for Torontonians as well. If you heard something that resonates with you, that you think is a great idea and is important, write to the mayor's office, go to a city council office. This is the work of year-round engagement. This is how we build up our democratic muscles. So, take up that call to action.
We're going to go to Megan Fitzpatrick. Megan is at the Patrick Brown headquarters in Brampton. The CBC Decision Desk does project that Patrick Brown is going to serve another term in Brampton. He is going to have to deal with a fractured city council. He's going to aim to perhaps secure some strong mayor powers for himself from Premier Doug Ford. Let's go to Megan Fitzpatrick now. She is at the Brown headquarters in Brampton. Megan. No, it sounds very quiet there for some reason. Not really much of a celebration yet. We will be heading to John Tory headquarters in just a few moments. John Tory expected to make his acceptance speech. They're having a celebration actually just down the street, so we look forward to that. Are there any surprises tonight in terms of the numbers that you're seeing, Sean?
I'm taken by this race in University of Rosedale, where we've got this back and forth. It seems every poll that reports we've got Diane Sachs or Norm Di Pasquale moving back and forth and trading the lead, and the margin is so tight, just over 130, 40 votes here. It's really fascinating to see this unfold.
But both came into the race with name recognition,
Absolutely.
Right? And some political back game.
Yeah, and it's a real question, depending on who wins this race, what that will mean for the dynamic on council. I mean, Norm Di Pasquale had the endorsement of Progress Toronto. I think you could say he's going to definitely be on the progressive side. And I would also have thought that of Diane Sachs, but there certainly was a lot of discussion during the campaign that perhaps her politics are a little bit more centrist, perhaps center-right, and that she might line up a little bit more with John Tory on a lot of issues. And, while she didn't have an endorsement from Mr. Tory, perhaps that's a race where it could go into the Tory camp or it could go into the progressive left camp, depending on where it lands.
Yeah, definitely Diane Sachs is going to be a swing vote for sure. She cares about the environment, right, and the climate, and obviously that is a huge issue. And there are a lot of interesting initiatives that are coming up, and businesses and companies and organizations, frankly, are getting heavily involved. So Mike Layden, actually, who's to be the counselor there, he was kind of seen on council as the climate champion. So she would be actually filling that spot. It will really depend how Tory manages that relationship. Right now, out of the gate, though, I would say that she's probably a guaranteed swing vote.
Well, one of the the toughest races to watch was in the ward of Scarborough North, and it had to do with the death of Councillor Cynthia Lai on Friday. The winner in Scarborough North tonight is Jamal Myers, and Jamal Myers is on the line now. Jamal, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
How did you feel about the events that unfolded in the few days leading up to voting day today?
It was incredibly sad. I just want to extend again my condolences to Councillor Lai's family, her friends, and those who knew her well. Our community right now is in mourning. A lot of people. She was very, very well loved in a lot of corners of the community. A lot of people, whether they liked her politics or not, they liked her as a person, and that's so important in order to be effective in this job. And she had that connection with so many people.
With this endorsement tonight, what do you hope to do at Toronto City Council?
We ran a very positive, forward-thinking campaign on ideas, on bringing people together, on community. And this endorsement is much bigger than just me. It's an endorsement of what our values are, on what we were fighting for, on a city that was built for everyone, a city that works for everyone. This victory is much, much bigger than me. It is all of the people who volunteered, all of the people who spread the word to their neighbors, all of the people who, when I was canvassing alone by myself in the summer, offered me water, or, you know, when it was raining, offered me an umbrella. Like, this victory means so much to so many people because they saw what we were fighting for, what we were about, and they knew that this is where the community needed to go.
What do you think your presence will mean when it comes to municipal politics in this city?
It will mean that there is a different voice at City Council. There is a voice coming from Scarborough who doesn't own a car, who doesn't own a home, who takes the TTC, who rides his bike, who was born and raised in the city, and who grew up in public housing. That voice is the voice of so many people in our community, and it's been missing from the conversation for so long. And I'm just humbled, honored, and privileged to finally bring that voice, those experiences, that perspective to the decision-making table.
I know it's an evening of mixed feelings for you, but I do want to offer my congratulations and good luck as you embark on your municipal career.
Thank you so much.
Jamal Myers is the new representative for Scarborough North, Ward 23, the ward formerly held by Cynthia Lai. Cynthia Lai passed away Friday. We are waiting for John Tory. We are told that he is coming into the room to cheers and celebration. The CBC projection desk says that John Tory will serve another term as Toronto mayor. It will be his third. He did suggest that he would just serve 2 terms. The discussion tonight had a lot to do with the pandemic, perhaps forcing him to reevaluate where he wanted to be politically and the idea of creating a legacy, which he couldn't really do in his second term and may try to achieve in his third term as mayor of Toronto. Let's go to the headquarters now. Do we have that now? Not yet. We're waiting for Toronto's campaign, Tory's campaign manager to introduce Tory. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Let's go to Linda Ward.
Yeah, Jill, I'm just keeping an eye on some races that seem to be really heating up here. We were talking earlier about that race in Etobicoke Lakeshore between incumbent Mark Grimes and Amber Morley. It seems Morley is widening that gap now between herself and Grimes. It's about 2,000 votes between them, and only a few polls left to report there. So we're definitely looking at a potential upset in that ward as well. And in York South-Weston, Francis Nunziata, one we've been watching all night, a bit of a surprise there. We're looking at a lead again for Francis Nunziata, but only about 70 votes between her and Chiara Padovani. So we've still got 4 polls left to report. Anything could happen.
It's not an easy night for Francis Nunziata.
It is not.
She's been up, she's been down, she's been back, she's been forth.
And I should say, Jill, as well, in Parkdale High Park, Gord Perks has taken the lead over Chamilamo, a decent enough lead there.
All right. There's some breakthrough moments, though, tonight that are coming through that will change the dynamics. Who will bring the biggest change movers, do you think, at City Council, Angela?
Well, it's interesting, again, from my count here. Tory definitely has 12 strong supporters. And then he also has 8 that are definitely on the left side. And then there's 4 swing votes happening.
We're going to hear a little bit of noise now. Mayor John Tory coming to the stage for his acceptance speech. John Tory will be serving a third term as Toronto mayor.
Patrick just said you learn a lot about a man when you're traveling around in a van across Ontario with him for 4 years. That's true, but what I learned about him too. But I want to tell you, I just gave him a hug there, and I felt that beard against mine, and I thought maybe I should bring back my ponytail from the pandemic. I was watching TV upstairs, and they were saying that what are candidates doing when they're watching the results? And they said they think they're freaking out. I want it on the record clearly that I was not freaking out while I was watching the results. I denied that, but I was pacing around. But I'm glad to be here, and I want to say tonight, thank you everyone who's here, and thank you Toronto. I am deeply grateful for the faith and the trust that you've chosen to put in me once again to lead our city for 4 more years. I've delivered a number of these speeches on election nights, and some of them were good, and some of them, to be candid, weren't so good. But tonight is a great night as we look ahead to a third term at City Hall with a strong mandate from the people of the City of Toronto. I want to begin by saying thank you to all of the people, because there were lots of them who put their names on ballots in this election. It's a courageous thing to do. And I want to, of course, congratulate those who've won seats on City Council. I look forward to working with all of them. And I'm hugely hopeful about the future of this city. But there are challenges in front of us, and we have to meet those challenges together. And I'm looking forward. I've said many times during the campaign, I want to work with anybody who wants to work with me. And I look forward to working with all of the elected members of City Council as we work together to make a great city better. I want to thank my family. I want to thank the campaign team. I want to thank the volunteers and everyone who supported me throughout the campaign and over the last 8 years as mayor. Well, we have a lot to celebrate tonight as a team and as a city. I requested that tonight should be lower key in keeping with these challenging times, and should be about you, the people who made this happen for the city and for me in this great democratic exercise we've just been through. And so I begin with a big and sincere thank you to my co-chairs, Anna Bailau, our deputy mayor, who's retiring from politics for now, Deb Hutton and Zubair Patel, who have also been co-chairs of the campaign, and of course Patrick Harris, who did a superb, professional job as campaign manager, and the entire campaign team, many of whom are here in this room. All of you, I give you my most sincere thanks. I want to thank you for your professionalism, for your amazing hard work, and above all, for your friendship. Because together, what we did is not that usual in this day and age. We ran a positive, responsible, honest campaign, one that goes against the prevailing negative, divisive trend, and I am very thankful for that, because that's the kind of campaign that I wanted to run, talking about what we're going to do and some of our ideas, and doing it in a positive way, positive about the ideas and positive about the future of this city. Serving as your mayor in this great city continues to be the honor of a lifetime. I love our city and I love working for the people of this city. That's why I ran for re-election in the first place. We've come so far over the past 8 years, but we have unfinished business that I'm absolutely determined to see through. We've made so much progress on getting transit and housing built and growing our economy. And now we have a strong mandate to continue with that progress. And that is what I asked for, a strong mandate, and that is what I have been given. We're going to work with the provincial and federal governments to keep getting the big things done. We're going to get housing built, much more housing and much more affordable and supportive housing in many more places across our city. We're going to get the $28 billion transit plan built, the Scarborough Subway, the Ontario Line, the Eglinton Crosstown West, the Yonge Street North Extension, and I am determined to make sure that the Eglinton East, Scarborough LRT, and the waterfront transit lines will be moving forward as well during this term of office. We are going to do everything we can to keep our city affordable for the residents who live here and for those who want to live here. We're going to do everything we can to keep our city safe and to support the police as they continue to modernize and keep us safe. We're going to do all we can to support all of the community organizations who work to help the people who need the help the most, including those experiencing homelessness. We're going to make sure that City Hall is focused on the nuts and bolts services that you and all the people of Toronto rely on every single day. I indicated during the campaign, I am not satisfied that some of those basics are as they should be, and that we must and we will get to work on that tomorrow morning to make those things better and to make them as they should be and as they must be. We're going to do everything we can as a city government to make sure that Toronto's economy comes back stronger than ever. That's something I worked hard on prior to the time of the pandemic. I worked hard on it during the pandemic, and now I'm going to work hard to make sure we fashion the kind of recovery that leaves no one behind. And we're going to make sure in that regard that we keep our city united. I am very focused as a person and as a mayor on making sure that we do not fall victim to the strife and the divisiveness that we see elsewhere, and that we continue to be a city that welcomes and respects and supports everyone. There is no room in this city for the kind of hate or bitterness and division that some prefer for their own purposes. And so I will lead in a positive way. I will continue to lead in a positive way which unites, to set an example by respecting everyone and by standing up and speaking up when any group of Torontonians are disrespected. We have resisted the global tide of division over these past years. I'm proud of that because it is true that diversity is our strength. But even greater inclusion must be our goal going forward. You know, I knocked on literally thousands of doors right across the city these past few months. There were no media cameras there, just me talking with Torontonians. And notwithstanding what you sometimes read, most of those people were filled with pride and hope for their city. But many of them are tired. They're still recovering from the dark days of the pandemic. They're feeling the pressures of the affordability crisis. They did feel that their mayor and their city government supported them through those days, and now they are looking for continued support from their city government. Support for communities which remain distant from the opportunity that is Toronto. Toronto is opportunity. It's opportunity all over the place, but people feel distant from that opportunity sometimes. Support for seniors who think that we're not moving fast enough to accommodate some of their changing needs. Support for those experiencing mental health and substance use challenges. They seem too often to just fall between the cracks. It's better these days in that we see them, but now we have to collectively decide, and it's certainly a decision that I have made as the mayor now and the mayor who will be mayor for another 4 years, that we are going to support them. And we can't do that alone, but we must support these people who are suffering in our city. They're suffering from an illness that happens to affect their brain. Would we leave people unsupported who are having a heart ailment or a lung ailment or a problem with their stomach? We wouldn't. And we must not continue to leave unsupported those who are experiencing mental illness and substance abuse, and we can't do it alone. It is a responsibility of the healthcare system, and that is a responsibility in which we will have to have a partnership to support people, a partnership with the other two governments. I want the thousands of people that I met and others I didn't meet to know that I will be working as hard as ever for the next 4 years to address those concerns that I just mentioned and others, to try to improve those supports that I mentioned, because those are the kinds of things that stand between us and our full potential as a city. We all know there are these challenges and others ahead. I made no secret of that when speaking on the campaign trail. Whether it be the city government or your own household, we will have to face economic and financial challenges in the coming months. The city itself is looking at more than a $1 billion budget crunch for next year. And since I will not be imposing big tax increases on people already in the midst of an affordability crisis, it's just not the right thing to do. It does mean that the challenge
You're listening to Toronto Mayor John Tory, CBC's decision desk, projecting that he will serve another term, his third as mayor of the city of Toronto, talking about the strong mandate that he received from voters. And I think that was, for me, a really key phrase that he used, that strong mandate, Sean.
Absolutely, Jill. I think he's really trying to pave the way for his agenda, which, as you said, is to, not raise taxes, to fill that budget hole. It remains to be seen how he's going to do it.
I was going to say, that's the question that he keeps being asked. How do you do that? with that kind of a deficit.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has hinted at this. I think he has to go to upper levels of government and ask for, frankly, one-time funding or more revenue tools. But that's probably a debate for another day. But I think that's probably where it's headed.
All right. I think we're going to try and talk to Amber Morley. Amber Morley is celebrating in a big way tonight. She defeated Mark Grimes in Etobicoke Lakeshore. Amber Morley on the line now. Amber, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's exciting times at Etobicoke Lakeshore. Very happy to bring the change that we've been waiting for quite some time.
What kind of change do you hope to bring?
We are excited to have a councillor who is engaged, who is responsive, and who is ready to tackle, honestly, the challenges that the city has continued to see grow, but have just really gone unaddressed. And I think the lack of diversity on our council has been part of the challenge. And so I am a renter, I'm a diverse woman. I'm very excited to bring my voice and perspective to the table at City Hall for the next term.
Why do you think you were able to break through and defeat an incumbent tonight?
It's my second time on the ballot. That certainly made a big difference. I showed Etobicoke Lakeshore residents in 2018 what we could do. We were a very strong second place finish, and we did the work necessary to get over the top time. So having had City Hall experience, I've got a background in public relations, and I've worked on campaigns since I was a teenager as a volunteer and as a support staff. So I wasn't new to this, and I really did believe in what it is I hope to bring to residents. So I can't believe we got over the top. It's still setting in, but we're so incredibly proud and just grateful for the opportunity to be example to the rest of the city.
Well, I don't want to completely burst the bubble. We still have 5 polls that we're waiting to hear from, but we know this is a close race, and you are in the lead at the moment. So let's hope that you can continue the celebrations once the final numbers come in. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Jill.
All right, that is Amber Morley, edging ever closer to representing Ward 3 Etobicoke Lakeshore and closer to defeating the incumbent, Mark Grimes. Let's take a final check of numbers with Linda Ward.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting to look at here, Jill, is when you're looking at the big picture, and we talked about the wards that were vacant, but let's look at the ones where there were incumbents. And when we're looking at that right now, of course, we're still waiting on final numbers to come in, but it looks like all but 2 are strongholds in those wards that the incumbent has held on. Of course, we just heard from Amber Morley. We're still waiting on those last few numbers to come in there. That one is still up in the air. And York South Weston, we are watching this one like a hawk as Frances Nunziata seems to be in for the fight of her life here tonight. And still just about 70 votes in between there, between her and Kira Padavani. Nunziata in the lead at this moment in time with 4 polls remaining.
No numbers yet from Hamilton, so we're waiting to see how Andrea Horvath does in her bid to become mayor of Hamilton. I'm going to give a final word to the panel Victoria Kukex, what do you make? 2 incumbents on the bubble tonight, may not be back at City Hall. What does that tell you?
I'm excited about the new voices that are coming in. I think the incumbents, can create different pathways to championing different voices through committees and through other pieces like that. And I think it also speaks to the nature of us having to have our institutions work with our citizens for greater engagement, for better understanding, to lessen exclusionary design so that we understand how everything works. So we need to use plain language more. We should be able to vote anywhere. I'm really interested to see the numbers of who actually came out tonight and who made all of these decisions happen. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of work to do, both on the side of citizens, but also on the sides of institutions as well.
We heard John Tory talk about the strong mandate that he received, but he has no decision about the wards and who represents the wards. So what kind of a council does he have to work with, Angela?
Interesting. Looking at the numbers now, neither side really of council have a majority. So right now, Tory still has 12. If Francis Nunziata is successful tonight, he will have 13. If Diane Sachs is successful, she'll be considered a swing vote. So still a solid 13, still needs that 14 to get anything done. And if both of those wards turn more to progressive candidates, then they're at 11. So we're actually in a really interesting crossroads where, will Tory be bold, right? And, as he's trying to define his legacy as a consensus leader, is he going to support those provincial priorities and exercise that use of those strong mayoral powers? Or will he now see that council has shifted left? It has shifted left. We see 3 definitely that have come to light that he has lost tonight, and will focus his priorities there.
And this is a council that you're going to have to cover, Sean.
That's right. Hey, you know what? That's an exciting dynamic, watching to see how these relationships develop, where the coalitions are built or not built. These are the things that I'm there for. It's great.
Well, I have to say thank you to everybody. It's been a really interesting night, and it's always great to sit at the table and have these kinds of conversations and watch the numbers come in. And as I always say to people, you think you know what's going to happen, but there are always some surprises, as there were tonight. So my thanks to Victoria Kukex. Thank you so much. Angela Drennan. Of course, our municipal reporter, Sean Jeffords. Linda Ward bringing in the numbers for us tonight. Thank you. I know that's not an easy job to do. The mayors who are returning in the GTA, Bonnie Crombie to Mississauga, Patrick Brown to Brampton. Still a race that's too close to call in Vaughan for Stephen Del Duca and Andrew Horvath. The numbers even haven't come through yet from the city of Hamilton. So what that means is you can continue to follow these races by referring to cbc.ca for regular updates on those races that are still in progress. My thanks to Marina Ray, our technical producer. Our thanks to our producer, Emma Waverman. My name is Jill Dempsey, and you've been listening to Toronto Votes 2022. We will continue to have the conversation about the election tomorrow on Metro Morning with Ismaila Alpha. We will be joining regularly scheduled program on CBC Radio 1.